Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to F.L.O.W Presents. We are starting our new series on Triggered. And I know, half of y'all out there, if you're watching and you look like me, you probably believe some of the things I believe. I know you're excited because we have a new president-elect. And maybe if you don't think like I do or believe the things I do, you're probably just excited that this period is at least over at this stage. And so we knew that we would be coming after this election cycle. And we thought, what better time to start a series on mental health entitled Triggered. So I'm excited. We are gonna have a conversation today. We're gonna keep it honest. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with other people. Go back and rewatch it because we're about to go in on mental health, right, in our population, particularly among young adults, Black young adults. So I'd like to invite my other panelists with me. F.L.W, she's now been a regular. We got F.L.O.W regulars. So F.L.W, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. I honestly, like I said, I'm feeling better that this part of the process is over. We have another month plus to see how that turns out.
I completely agree. We're not having to go rush to counseling like 2016 when people had to get therapy dogs and miss classes in school.
Oh, for real.
Mental health day.
Let's not rush. There's still a pandemic and there's still a month and change. Hey, we have Mix Cece here with us. What's up, Cece?
Hi.
Cece, me and F.L.W were just setting the groundwork because we said if you kind of look like us and think like us, you're excited that there's a new, the process is over thus far.
Oh yeah.
How you feeling, Cece?
Yes, just a very sigh of relief, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was just long. It took too long.
It did, right? Like who would have thought an election would take, what is it? We're at 4 days, like 5 days. It's wild. But as we talk about mental health, I think it's important that we're doing it now after this long cycle. So I want to read for y'all, because you guys are rocking with me. I want to read some statistics for you and tell me your thoughts on these statistics, right? So according to the National Institute of Mental Health, and this is any mental health illness, which is defined as mental, behavioral, emotional disorder, right? And it can vary ranging from no impairment to impairment, moderate and severe. In 2017, it was estimated that 46.6 million adults age 18 or older had any mental illness or had a mental illness. And that represents about 18.9% of all US adults. But I got some more for you before I hear your thoughts, right? Now, that is higher among women, about 22.3%, as opposed to men. And then young adults in particular, this is what got me, y'all. 18 to 25, they had the highest prevalence at 25%, and then followed by 26 to 49 and 50. And here's the thing that I know y'all gonna wanna say something on, and I'll share it again. 28.6, right? The highest was really among those who identified as mixed race. 28.6%. So F.L.W and Cece, what do you guys think about hearing those statistics? Last done in 2017. I'm gonna highlight that year, 2017, 3 years ago. What are your thoughts about those statistics?
It sounds like the people that we create the most stress for are having mental health problems.
Oh, if I heard you right, the people we create the most stress for have the most problems. What you trying to say? What you trying to say, Cece? Say more. No, don't. We're not speaking in code here. We calling it out. This is F.L.O.W. We all the way honest about it.
I mean, let's speak specifically about women, right? If we create a world in which women feel like they have to walk around with their car keys in their knuckles, we've also created a world where women have anxiety.
Makes sense. I mean, just looking at the women population. F.L.W, what are your thoughts on that?
I am thinking where the black people, where's the race, the statistics on race, like how many more are these talking about black women, white women, Hispanic women, specifically, because I see that you said the mixed 28.6 mixed race, but I know that number may have increased some more for people of color, especially since 2016, not just for that statistics in 2017, because even though it's been a stigma in the Black community where a lot of people don't seek help or mental help, or a lot of them are homeless, a lot of them are veterans, soldiers, like myself, I know the number is greater for the Black community, especially within the Baltimore and metropolitan area, because I know too many people that, of color, that they're afraid to be on the meds, or they know it's not something they do generationally in their family. That's not how they deal with,
So,
trauma.
Liv, you and Cece bring up this idea that it's not surprising to you that these two particular populations have higher rates of mental illness. And I kind of want to dive deep into that because we talk about triggered, and you look at what it means, what it meant to be Black just in the last 3 years. I mean, we have 100 plus years of history, right? But just in the last 3 years, what it means to be Black. How have you both felt? Like, just share maybe a little bit of your story about what it's meant for you, and however you choose to show up, to have been Black in the last 3 years, 4 years of this presidency.
I would say that when it comes to being Black in this country, I have, my mother has always taught me since I got here in 97 that, you have 3 strikes against you already. You're a foreigner, you're Black, and you're a woman. Okay. So being from a different country and seeing what happened, what was happening in this country, it's like it had a progression. It was a slow progression, because I've always asked the question in school, especially, college, when I first started college, like, do you guys feel there's a need for a civil rights movement still? And a lot of the students, African Americans, told me, no, there's not, because we were doing fine at the time. Fast forward to 2016, is when people start to realize, oh, racism isn't done. I didn't know that this was happening in other places. And right. So
sorry, Emily, like, what, you're nodding consent. What's coming up for you?
For me, as I said, that's all for me. It was like a volcano of emotions that erupted, from anger to depression to insomnia to a lot of anxiety, to having to watch my back, and the fact that, I wasn't diagnosed with anything. It just, as I said, is something that I always had to keep in the back of my head, that something could happen. In 2016, I think, was the year that those triggers went off. I never had anxiety before, but then to have a panic attack, couldn't breathe, or having to talk to people or go to counseling for it was scary. Or being in a different country like Kuwait and hearing about the injustices back home in America was a trigger for me. I had sleep issues all the way across the world, So it was triggering. It was a different time in our lives back in 2016.
What about you, Cece?
I think it was interesting because, on the one hand, it's an experience that like I have been obviously always completely aware of as a person who was born and raised here, as a person who's had to live in this skin, as a person who went away to college to a predominantly white institution. Like I have just had to live through and understand what racism is, what systemic race is. And like I have had to have a good understanding of these things for a really long time.
Mhm.
And sort of to see this like grand awakening is nice on one hand, but sort of with this grand awakening also seems to come this like grand like wall building of like I'm not gonna listen to that awakening. And I think that's sort of maybe where it gets frustrating. And I think that may be where I get the most triggered, when I'm presented with situations where it feels like people are not willing to sort of realize that the world is moving on without you.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what the last 4 years have been. It's like, oh, now we're awake and alive about racism, and that's exciting. But like, listen to all of these people still saying that's not true. That's so strange.
And that's so when you mentioned that, that's what I want to pivot us to and really live in a little bit as we can. That's what triggers me. Like I also, as Native American, not Native American, as a native born or American native born, I think really, I don't think I really understood what racism is, y'all. And I gotta be real honest about it. I don't think I did, right? And this is me, born in the Bronx, lived there for a while, surrounded by Black Hispanics, then moved to Jersey, then I become one of, right? Like
Yeah.
tons of whites around me, but still don't have the capacity to understand, like, oh, when they say certain things, that's microaggression.
Yeah.
Anyway, fast forward to 2016, and then you see things come up on your timeline, right? Because now we're in a generation of timelines. Like people have the ability to like post things and they can be some of themselves in a way that's safe for them. Maybe not for us, but safe for them. And I'm like, I honestly, y'all, I did not think the president 45 was going to be elected. Let me just be honest with you. Like I was like, no, that type of overt like behavior, right? Like you can keep it in like you can keep it in the silos, but not overt. Like no one's gonna do that. And then boom, it gets elected. And I'll tell you, my mind was blown. Like I don't know how you guys had it, but like when you say nice, CC, I'm thinking like, nah, it wasn't nice for me. I was legit triggered.
Right.
So how did you guys navigate? Because CC, I know I've talked to you, and Emily, I don't know if you've been a part of this. How did you navigate now the conversations that arose after 2016? Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
Yes. Give me 2 seconds. I need something to drink.
Yeah, no problem. But like, Amliv. Well, wait. Go ahead, CC. We'll come back. Like, I'm curious. How did you handle conversations that came up after our president was elected in 2016?
So it was a little heated because one person in my family, very close to me, like my older sister, we were having a conversation, and I was like, who did you vote for? And the fact that she told me she voted for 45, my jaw dropped and my heart sunk. And fast forward to now again, she did it again. And it's almost like you thought somebody that you were raised in the same household with, and then you figure out that you don't. Yeah. So to me, 2016 was like that the whole time. Like you think some people, especially people who are not of your race, people of your race and people not of your race, that they shock you in what they believe and why they did certain things or why they say certain things and why it's not a problem for them. And when the new term came up about the Karens and the Kevins, it's like we laugh about it, but we're serious about it at the same time as well, because it's like now you kind of hear Maya Angelou in the back of your head saying, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't make it go over your head. Don't let it just slide under the rug. Like actually confront it and confront them and know who you're dealing with, moving forward.
And that's their concept that I think now I was recently introduced to gaslighting, and I know I've had this conversation on Facebook. And I think, I don't know if there's a specific term for when it comes to like persons of all gender being gaslit from those who are like race, right? My thing is, I feel like I had conversations where people are like, no, it's really you. I mean, I had one from a coworker at a time when I worked in Jersey, predominantly white area, very affluent, upper middle class, if not a little above. And the comment was around respect, around the shootings, right? And they said that one of the individuals, I think it was the gentleman who got, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, who got shot a couple times in his back. And the conversation came up about respect for authority. And I'm like, I don't have to respect you. Like him walking away, right? Even if you deem it as disrespect, doesn't warrant that type of violence. And then we just got into this conversation that made me think, like, I walked around the building with you. Like there were times when, because I worked with students in crisis, there were times where I was like locked in arms next to you during a high tense moment. And here I'm realizing that like, you may not, like in another circumstance, we may not be as supportive of each. Well, let me say, I was concerned that they may not be as supportive of me in those situations. And then it's like all the feelings that come up, like fear and a concern for my safety. Because like I said, I walked around this building and now I'm wondering, like you said, Emily, if these people that I looked at, what were you really thinking?
Yes.
Like, Cece got a lot of head nods right now, like, yeah, true.
Because I think what this brings up a lot for me is that I said earlier that I have sort of a good knowledge base about racism and systemic racism and the way that it operates just by nature of me being Black, but that's also selling a little bit short. A lot of this comes from the experience of being Black at a very specific type of predominantly white institution.
Okay, say more.
I went to, the school that I went to is like, it's a research institution, right? So like people are here and like literally like creating new knowledge, writing studies. Also people come here from all over the place with all types of different views. And so the way that you see people in the media, sort of the way that you see white people in the media responding to Black Lives Matter, I saw my classmates respond like that to Black Student Union. Mm-hmm. The way that you see sort of white people creating narratives about, well, if you had just complied, I had my classmates make those same narratives about encounters with student police. So I saw the things that are happening on a sort of national basis, I saw happen, you know what I'm saying, on my college campus with the people that I sat next to.
Got it.
And at the same time that I'm seeing all of that happen, I'm also sitting in my Black Studies courses and I'm learning that this is not all just happening because it's happening, but it's happening because this is the system that they designed. So then, it's happening on purpose.
Tell us more then, how did you manage, like what was your mental space like during this time? Because that sounds like a high pressure, high anxiety. And let me just throw out some facts for y'all. Again, National Institute on Mental Health, right? Based on the diagnostic interview data from et cetera, an estimated 19.1% of US adults had an anxiety disorder in the past year, right? In the past year of this publication. An estimated 31.1% of adults experience an anxiety disorder at some time in their life. And Cece, what you described to me sounds like a type of environment where you have a lot to, for those that don't know, anxiety is like, is described as like tense time. Your body feels tense, you feel tight, but you also are worrying about potential dangers or concerns. Like, so tell us, how did you manage that time in your life?
Well, the great thing about it is that, again, because you're in the space where you're also in Black Studies classes and learning about this and in organizations like BSU and around historically, like it's a predominantly white institution, but like Black Greek letter organizations still exist there. Those are historic Black things. So while we're at a predominantly white institution, there is still sort of a way for us to create this bubble of Black people and this bubble of safety that we really relied on. That, and just also being at an age where you more feel like there's being at an age and probably also in a space where you feel like there's more that you can do about it, right? Like now, if I want to change something in Washington, D.C., that becomes a whole big deal and petitions and blah, blah, blah. But if I want to change something on my college campus, there are people that I can write letters to, and there are protests that I can schedule. And so I think that was a lot of dealing with the anxiety, was actually tackling the issue and claiming the space and saying this is a safe space and saying we're not going to tolerate this. And that is sort of where you get, you know, the social justice warrior in college. That's where you get that mindset, because you have people that are experiencing these really high anxiety situations, but they're also in situations where they can do something about it because we're all learning.
That's interesting. Emily, you mentioned your background. You are a soldier in the Army specifically. You did serve for a time. Can you how did you handle any high anxiety moment of your life? Like Cece talks about being able to engage in action and creating and looking for spaces that are safe, right? What about you? How did you manage high anxiety times?
You're talking specifically in the military or just?
Or if there was another time outside of that. I'm sorry, I'm making the assumption that with the high anxiety time, maybe there's another time that was high.
Well, I would say the military kind of triggered it because, I had childhood traumas that I didn't really deal with when I left Jamaica and everything. So, being in the military was like a saving grace for me from an abusive relationship I was with my ex-husband. I was getting a divorce the same year Donald Trump was elected. And that same year, I didn't get diagnosed with PTSD due to not because of an IUD or combat or anything. It was more towards MST. MST is military sexual trauma. So to me, it triggered everything from my past childhood and everything else in my life that it brought all of that up. So for me, the anxiety came when, being in the military, you expect people to have your six, which is to have your back. But the fact that while Black Lives Matter and everything else was going on back at home, I had nobody to confide in. I had no one to trust but the Lord, basically. Not the women, not the Black women, not the guys, because of the incident that happened to me. It's like all of them, everybody in the Black community had turned their backs on me, and I had nothing to depend on, no one to depend on. So I think my anxiety and depression started, within the military, but even coming out the military, coming home, the adjustment period was rough too, because things my family members did that were normal before were a trigger to me. Like my mom walking into a kitchen with my back turned startled me, and I almost like hurt the woman. Or people going out and being in a crowd of people or going to restaurants and stuff, that was a trigger for me, because it was like I couldn't trust anybody, not even people in my own community. So I mean, of course, now I have meds to help deal with the depression and anxiety. And I guess that's why I'm not as triggered with what was happening, onward into 2020 now, But without the meds, I could tell you, I would definitely have isolated, been more depressed, been more anxious, been more, in a mess, So it's just that, having a support team and going to counseling and having coping skills did help to minimize the stress of the traumas that had, ensued throughout that time.
You mentioned some things, and I want to really make sure I'm hearing you right, where Cece talked about experiencing it and seeing it and living it in a micro space within a macro space, and finding Cece's own micro spaces to like, feel protected. you also talk about this idea of needing to use medication, which sometimes is taboo, right? Needing to have additional support to get you to a place of feeling regulated, and also looking for spaces that you can feel safe. But then, Emily, what I heard you talk about is, which I think is big in our community, this idea of isolation, this idea of like, when I'm triggered, like when I have these responses, I withdraw into myself, right? I pull back from people. And I kind of want to ask two questions. Let me make it, ask one to be clear. Like, how did you become aware of your trigger responses, right? Because Emily, you kind of described some. I'm wondering if you have some as well. So I'll start with you. Like, how do you know you're triggered? Like, what comes up for you where you're like, yeah, I'm triggered right now. That's real.
Okay, so for me,
Let me start with Cece, then I'll go.
yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. I can take a second to think. She can go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Emily.
For me, as soon as the incident happened, it brought me back to the age of 4 years old of what I did. You know, what I did was, you know, I kept quiet. I questioned things. I started crying. I started to have these moments of I couldn't sleep. I felt anxious all the time that I had to be watching my back. I felt, you know, fear, afraid all the time, or this feeling of helplessness came over me, you know? So to me, it brought me back to a stage of being a toddler again, feeling that helplessness and no one knew what was going on. Like me acting out or having anger outbursts wasn't enough of a, you know, signal to people that something's wrong here. Like she's not acting like herself, something is off, you know. So for me, when I started to act out is when one of my supervisors called me aside, and he was like, "What's going on? Like, what's wrong with you?" You know? And that's when I broke the secret out that, hey, something happened to me and I just need to tell it because I can't sleep at night.
Wow. So if I want to make sure I'm hearing you right, you mentioned feelings of like being frozen,
Yeah,
memories
frozen.
from triggered from the past, right?
Right.
Reliving those moments as they occurred, a continual sense of tenseness, and then acting out like behaviors that may not be typically characteristic of you if you're not triggered.
Right. Because you remember there's fight, flight, and then there's freeze. People only know fight or flight, and they don't really acknowledge that freezing is a part of it as well. You know? And then you go down that rabbit hole of guilt to say, did I cause this? Is this my fault? This has to be my fault. What did I do? What was I wearing? What did I say? You know, to go down that rabbit hole and not knowing that you're starting the process of grieving the loss of something that was taken from you or something that shouldn't have happened to you did happen, and trying to get some kind of grasp or control over the situation.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that. Cece, if you would please, like, what does triggered look like for you?
I think the clearest way is really unclear, but it's just that I feel different. I feel not like myself. I feel like if I'm walking down the street and I'm listening to music, then that brings me joy. And if I then am walking past something that triggers me, then I don't feel that sense of joy anymore. I feel a different feeling.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like for you, it is the difference. It is knowing where you prefer to be, like that constant state of this is my baseline. And when there's I don't, you didn't say drastic, sorry, I'm filling in drastic, but when there's a change in that, it's like, what happened? What changed that? I actually want to say that's more for me. Emily, and again, I want to honor just you sharing kind of your background and your history with us and with our audience, because this is a real conversation. You know, we try to create these spaces in Flow to have honest conversations about things that are impacting our community, and that is one of them. I will say for me, I align with Cece where it's just a difference, and I use that conversation because it's now a trigger thought for me. That conversation I had with an ex coworker, because of I think my naivete, right? Or the level of naivete I had while working with these people, thinking like, oh, they see me as another person. They don't just see me as a Black man. And then I had this conversation on Facebook, and I see how they responded to my thoughts and my voice, right, as who I am. And then I like a flood of microaggressions of, oh wait, no, when they said that, that's what that meant, or that's what that meant. And so for me, that's how I know I'm triggered. Like you, Amliv, it's, you know, it's a difference, like what Cece said, but there's also now it's like whoosh.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And we were talking about this, y'all, and I appreciate you guys being with me for this time, because like I feel like when I talk to people, I'm seeing it happen more often. Like I'm seeing that come across timelines and feeds, like I'm triggered, or this happens. Like there's a world trying to express something out there. So I appreciate you answering me what triggered looks like for you guys. How do you treat a person that triggers you? So I'm gonna read a quote from Facebook. Someone, the J Squared TV says, after the 2016 election, I was just honest about my experience as a Black person. If they didn't see or care about what was happening to me, to people like me, then I knew there was no point in talking to them. So I kind of want to use it as a catalyst. Like, how do you respond to the triggering situation? Say again?
Can you read that again?
The J Squared TV says, after the 2016 election, I was just honest about my experience as a Black person. If they didn't see or care about what was happening to people like me, then I knew there was no point in talking to them. And so I kind of want to ask, how do you respond to triggering situations, to the people that trigger you or moments that trigger you? Like J Squared basically is like, I'm out. Like if you're not with it or not for me, deuces. So what about you guys? And Cece's already laughing, so I imagine there's a number of responses coming up.
Because the universe is crazy. Like I literally just had like a thing where the answer to this became true, like literally just right before this. But from that situation, I know that the answer is still the same as it is from college, which is I prefer direct action. So if you have a problematic belief and you're saying something that I find triggering, and you are willing to have a human conversation with me where we talk about facts and your science and things that are real besides your feelings, then that's what I want to do.
You can't talk to the president then, okay? You cannot be in any media room ever, but I'm sorry, continue.
Then that's what I want to do. That's how I deal with being triggered. I think that the world is not just going to change, and people are not just going to stop being problematic, because when you get down to the root of it, unfortunately, we live in a country where problematic beliefs are created by real life perspectives.
Interesting. Can you say that again, please? I really feel like people listening to this, you need to like let that sink in. Please drop that.
We live in a country where problematic beliefs are created by real life perspectives.
Wow. Okay. Say more now. Okay.
And so if people are willing to have a conversation with me where I can explain to them how that is a perspective and I understand that perspective, but it is not truth, and I have science and, you know, real things to talk to you about to show you how that is just perspective and not truth. And if people are willing to engage with me that way, then that is sort of how I get over the hump of being triggered. Now, I find that most times people are unwilling to engage with me that way because, again, the beliefs are informed by real life perspectives. And a lot of times people are unwilling to sort of have their equilibrium shattered in the ways that some of these conversations could lead to. And so, you know, we have this conversation all the time about this sort of agree to disagree culture. But I think that is the root of why I was having that conversation with you, because I find myself in those spaces more often than not, because when I feel triggered, I want to talk to you about why that was a problem and why you shouldn't say things like that. And like, let me help you learn. I guess I'm just like a teacher at heart, right?
So let me try to synthesize for those who are trying to encapsulate this knowledge before we jump to Amliv. The first thing is when you are triggered, you look to basically find a space of reason. right? And reason is for you an explanation of your stance, your perspective, but not alone. You bring that with facts and science, things that you believe both parties can ground themselves on. Though you also point out, though, that sometimes that's hard to have because you identify that people's experiences tend to trump their desire to seek reason because it can shift things. And I want to give people context. So Cece and I worked together a ways back, and we've had a number of conversations where agree to disagree was kind of a thing that we explored because it really meant like, I just didn't want to hear your stance anymore. You're not agreeing with me. You're not taking my side. So let's break out. And we looked to explore really, how do you come to a point of mutual understanding where where the perspective and their differences are valid, but also there's some measure of true understanding that may include facts and science, reasonable. And you're right, it's not easy. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right, Amliv, I hope people are ready to hear whatever you got to hear because Cece just dropped heavy weights on them.
Right. No, but I completely agree where Cece was going with it because, you do have to be a teacher in a sense because they are ignorant. Let's be honest. People can be ignorant in their beliefs because if someone tells me that they're a Christian and they believe that racism is okay, I need them to go reread the same Bible we read, because the last time I checked, the God of love, the Jesus Christ that we hear about loving our neighbors as ourselves and loving our enemies as ourselves, it becomes harder in that moment, especially when it comes to race or social injustice, to calmly say to people or educate them on, because as I said, I have two thoughts. One thought, I could cuss you out, or the second thought can be, I can, take the time, I'm gonna calm down and really, figure out where your thought process is, and then we can break it down line for line, and for me to, I will try to understand where you're coming from, but I'm not going to agree with you. And I can tell you that in love and be able to, give you a history lesson of where I'm coming from or where my people are coming from, why we feel this way, because it goes back to compliance where, a lot of our enslaved people, because I'm not going to call them slaves, they were enslaved, okay, complied. And we're done complying. That's all it comes down to.
Okay. Cece, you're already good.
Yeah, something that I wanted to piggyback. She said, we can have the conversation and, I'll do my best to hear your perspective, but I'm not gonna agree. And to someone else who is not paying enough attention in the conversation, that sounds like a problematic attitude. But what she's indicating is that people who are not a part of the privileged group, we have no choice but to know your perspective. We heard that already. Your perspective has created what I'm trying to talk to you about. So it's actually your turn to just listen to me. I don't want to hear what you're about to say because I know that thing that you're about to say. I don't need to hear that thing. I need you to listen to me. You don't know what I'm about to say. I know what you're going to say.
Wow.
And I think that's again a part of the issue, right? Is that everybody's like, well, I'm a person and I have an opinion. And it's like, well, not about this because the thing that I'm talking about, you don't experience. Right. So no.
I laugh because I hear voices of people who echo that thought, and they're so genuine in what they're trying to present as being rational and
right.
Like, we can talk about this. So I want to push this conversation forward, but I also want to make sure to tie it in. I think this is why it's hard to articulate mental health concerns within our community, right? Because what comes up as a level of tense feelings for us, the panic attacks you talk about, are usually dismissed by those with power and privilege as an overreaction, right? As you're taking it too deeply. Well, you don't know what it's like, and I'll give you a real experience. I will not share the school, but again, working in this place that I was in, I typically didn't even realize that it was probably a mental health exercise, but I would go to my car on my lunch breaks to like rest, separate from the building and everything and rest. One day I came back in and innocently enough, again, probably full of naive, I had my hoodie up. It was like a low key day, I had sweatpants, and I walked into the building, went to my classroom, was doing the work. Principal follows in and goes, "Hey, just silly question. Did you walk into the front door?" Yeah. Now, this is a school with security. I had to use my key, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. They shared, the front desk said all they saw was a Black man walking in with a hoodie and they were concerned. And at the time I laughed it off, and let me keep it real. I'm thinking to myself, like, that's how I'm viewed, right? I was literally the only Black male employee, and I want to push myself to say in the district, right? Not in my school, in the district. And I can't tell you how after that, I listened to things differently. That's not a work environment you should walk into, right? Like that's room for potential distress. Because now I got to think, every time I wear a hoodie, how are they looking at me? Like, should I not wear a hoodie? But I have a right to wear a hoodie. And we think about these things coming up in our community, and they result in mental health. Like the woman that has to be concerned about every conference space she walks into that is dominated not just by men, but even by white men or white women. Like, I wonder how that feels to any person from a marginalized group. Like, that's the mental health thing that we're talking about. So why I bring this up? Because is there an appropriate approach? And y'all just help me dialogue with this. Like, how do we approach this issue of being triggered, right? Like, is it really about just leaving the spaces? Like, Cece, how do we, hold on, I'm gonna pause this. Thank you. I got a question here from Camilla Alexander. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Camilla, it could be Kamala. Okay. Do you think your worldview is the thing that shapes your moral compass? As how that may impact conversations that we get in. Let me put that in. Do you think your worldview is the thing that shapes your moral compass? Take the time and then answer whoever feels ready.
I think that the current answer is yes. I don't think that should be the current answer.
Say more.
You and I have had this sort of conversation about what I believe is a base sense of morality that we as human beings carry, that essentially is rooted in the idea that you shouldn't cause harm. You shouldn't be doing things that cause harm to other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that generally speaking, if we go back to that idea, then everybody's going to be fine. But because we've allowed perspective to shape morality, now we have isms, because people think that their perspectives on race and their perspectives on gender and their perspectives on sexuality should guide their morality.
So let me see if I can again internalize what you're sharing. You want to say, you're saying based on where we are right now, the answer is yes, but it shouldn't be. Let's make that clear.
Yeah.
And you look at that through the lens of, because without knowing it, I'm a racist, right? That tends to lead me towards the direction that, like, my whiteness is greater than your Blackness, right? Like, what you do as a Black person of color is more wrong. And it's even if the same action is done by a white person, or if I am somebody who is staunch on gender views, like, I would believe that it should be a binary structure. It is A or B. Whereas if I didn't have that particular worldview, I might be open to a more linear, is linear the correct word?
Very fluent. I like that. I like fluid better.
Fluid understanding of gender, and et cetera, et cetera. Am I hearing you right in that?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that, right? We understand that in places where Christianity is not the major religion, they have a different set of morals. And we understand that there are Native American societies where they revere people who are gender variant. You know what I'm saying? We know this. We know that there are other societies that don't think the things that we think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they have not allowed sort of white supremacy and colonialism to shape the morality.
Okay. Emily, what are your thoughts? I have a response I want to loop back to because something you specifically said. But Emily, if I'm going to get you in here, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so to me, growing, I feel like we were all brainwashed through the Euro worldview, the European worldview of what morality looks like or what it's supposed to be about. So for me personally, I would say, I had to explore that for myself, especially where I stood with Christianity in my own life 13 years ago. So to me, it's like today, I do agree that, um, it's a combination of a lot of things that happen where I learned this new word called generational or what's it called? It's like intergenerational or multi-generational trauma where we've been taught these wounds year after year after year, generation after generation after generation, where we think our worldview is supposed to be one way. That, as a Black person growing up in America, we think like we're no less than what these white counterparts told us we are, versus what we know we are supposed to be, knowing more about our African lineage or the ancestry or doing the ancestry DNAs and everything and exploring that world, or knowing that most of Africa were Muslim versus Christian. And, our worldview has changed a lot where we find our strength and our power within this new awakening that's happening within the Black community.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you sharing that, Amliv, and talking about furthering Cece's comment about how the dominant culture, which for a long time was white male, Eurocentric, has really shaped a lot of how the world sees themselves, unfortunately, and how it sees them. And then, Cece, I want to not miss an opportunity to bring in something you talk about. And you and I have talked about this a lot with Christianity. It's kind of my gripe as somebody who happily and faithfully believes all that I believe. I think my issue is that they neglect such a key component of that again results in people feeling triggered. Like we did a study in one of our Bible studies on this idea that at the foundation of the gospel is choice, right? And based on how we believe, like I want to speak clearly from my Christian lens, that we don't even realize how powerful that choice is, because if you believe in God, then you technically have the right to defy a divine being. Like I don't think people really understand what that means from a biblical perspective. Like that's how powerful choice is. But yet we take that Eurocentric approach to life, and we believe that because we have any measure of power or privilege over any group that's under that, we can then exert dominance and define what their choices should look like. And I gotta be honest, it's not biblical in my belief, like my reading through it. But then it does result in things like feeling triggered. We have people in our churches, we can't even have conversations about, let me keep it just simple. We can't even have conversations about sex, right? We can't, because you know what my feeling is? Because people are triggered, right? They think about the time that they were raped, right? They think about the time that they were suppressed, sexually suppressed. They think about their struggle within this particular context about what it means for them to be gender identified, right? But because of this Eurocentric model, because of this suppression and exertion of power and privilege in our own churches, people are triggered. And so we don't have conversations because people are triggered, you know? And I know I'm just kind of sharing that thought because it does bother me that we can't have these conversations. We can't really create these safe spaces for people to be triggered and move forward. I wonder if you guys have any thoughts to that. Slight ramble.
Well, who creates those spaces? I also, like, really quick sidebar just to make sure that I don't forget to say this. One of the big things that this conversation brings up for me is that when they finally realize that reparations should be a thing,
when they finally realize it,
when they finally realize this, a big part of that needs to be free mental health services for us because of exactly what she just talked about. Exactly this idea of multi-generational trauma and this trauma that's been passed down through our lineage, like that needs to be addressed. And when reparations happens, that is a perfect way to make sure that that is addressed on a large scale. So I wanted to make sure I threw that in there.
I wanted to build off that, then talk about the mental health, keeping it on Triggered. We had a series on Black women support the Black woman. And I've been trying to grow myself and really internalizing as much as possible what it's like to be a Black woman. I can't, but I can, I will never fully understand, let me say it that way, but I can try. And generational trauma is, to me, the reason why our Black women are so strong. And even in and of itself, that's traumatic. Like this idea that I have to be strong because anything less will result in my hurt, harm, dismissal. Like that in of itself is traumatic. And so we had that series, and I want to hear your thoughts on this because you're both nodding emphatically. We had this series, and I was like, I thought it was a compliment to be like, yo, you're a strong Black woman. It's like, every time you say that, you're reminding them of all the things that has happened in the community, all the things that like is probably encoded in their bodies, in their experiences, that comes up as like, no, I'm tired of being strong, ninja. But what are your thoughts?
You could go, Cece.
The first thing that I thought of honestly was Lizzo. Lizzo has a great thing about this. She talks about it all the time, that she's tired of people telling her that she's strong. Mm-hmm. She wishes that one time she would read an article that says she's beautiful. Because you're right. Telling someone how strong they are is just a reminder that this world continually puts me through bullshit. And I don't need that reminder. I would probably, be better served with reminders of my resilience. And that's not telling me that I'm strong. That's telling me that I'm beautiful. That's telling me that in spite of the things that I had to go through, you're celebrating me. And that's not what you're strong is saying. It's just, hey, reality is tough. Thank you.
I know.
Or to me, it's like we shouldn't even have to go through the things that we went through for you to even say the comments in the first place. If we had the family structure that we were meant to have or supposed to have since the start of enslavement, and families weren't separated, or rape wasn't an introduction to the men and the women, we wouldn't have these traumas or triggers in the first place. So for a woman like me, growing up in a single family home, my mother wouldn't have to be working the job she had to work or missing out on spending time with me growing up, for her to then be, rewarded with this trophy to say that, wow, you're strong, it took a lot of strength for her to even birth you in the first place. She didn't need to be reminded of the pain she had to go through to birth you, because so many complications could have happened. But as I said, if we, especially in the Black community, did not have the breakdown of the family structure, of the dads not being in the home, or the moms having to pick up all those pieces and do double time to work as hard to get you to where you are, we wouldn't need that comment in the first place.
I appreciate you guys sharing that. And Cece, I'm going to build off of what you said about mental health being free to the Black community. Share with me, both of you, I'd love to hear, what is your perspective on mental health, and has it always been what it is now?
What is my perspective? What does that even mean? I have issues with you and words.
Oh. It's real. This is how we know each other, just straight up. What are your thoughts, your feelings? How do you view mental health, right? And was it something that has always been what it is? And let me I'll start off by sharing my answer to that question. mental health was something I never considered.
Yeah.
It was something I now believe it is vital. I believe mental health should be a part of your regular management of self. Like you get regular checkups from a doctor, you do financial inquiry, like mental health should be just as regular. But it was never a thought for me. It was never a thought. It is the way it is now because of, for me, there was an actor who I had no relationship with this guy, just knew him on screen. Famous Jet Jackson. I share this story all the time because it's so powerful. He was on Disney. He ended up being on the show Rizzoli and Isles, and then it came out that he shot himself. He died by suicide. And it bothered the mess out of me. I like it. And it got me because I think the story was like he was also from a single family home, young Black man. I mean, I guess I projected myself onto him and I thought to myself, like, you should be happy, right? You're an actor, you're making a fairly amount of money. And then it hit me that it's like, no, that's not what that means, right? Like we all have things, demons, whatever word you want to put on them, that impact us. And so now for me, I'm like, there's no games about it. Like if you're experiencing some level of distress, you need to seek it out. But I know that's not everyone is where I am. So that's why I asked you guys, where are you on your thoughts around mental health now? And did you always think that way? Did you always have that approach? Hopefully better worded, Cece.
I can go. I do agree with Cece about having free mental health care, especially in this country, especially for people of color. And when I mean people of color, I'm talking not just Black people, Native Americans, and the Hispanic community, Latin Hispanic community as well. Because there's for me personally, I believe in being a self-advocate for mental health, because for me in the military to get the mental health treatment I needed was a struggle, even though it's freely given to me through TRICARE. And even after that, through the VA, it was a struggle because it's like people didn't believe you, or you needed proof, or you needed to give some kind of evidence of why you needed it, you know? And to a point where I felt like I was losing my mind. Like, am I really going crazy? Do I have to act crazy to get the help that I need? Because they would chalk it up to, oh, you're being paranoid. You're just being an angry Black woman. You need to chill. You need to relax. You need to breathe more. Those things come to mind. And I think that is to deter a lot of us from not seeking the help from the first time we go and ask for help and someone says things like this to us. So for me, it is something close to the heart, where I do agree it should be a part, not just like a dental checkup and a physical checkup, but it needs to be the first thing. And I really believe they should start doing that before they enlist in the military as well, to make sure everyone is mentally checked out before they join the military.
You mean
And
that the psychological profile they do in like 2 minutes, that's not enough?
no, it's not. Nah, they need to do a whole background check, a whole like mental eval, for real, what you have to check off to say how you're feeling, you know, those kind of questions, the deep questions that they don't always ask you. Because until I had to check those boxes is when I realized, wow, I've never really been asked these questions before. I've never really thought about that I had depression or anxiety, or because of my sleep issues, that it could have been something deeper. I just thought, you know, I worked so many nights, overnights at, you know, other jobs, that it was just something normal to me at this point. And I think because we've made it so normal in our culture and in our community, we tend to overlook that, you know, it could be something deeper that I might need a little bit more help for down the road. And it gets harder to ask for help because no one else we know may experience those same things, or we don't even talk about it at home. Like, this is the first time in my life my family has really discussed mental health, when I started to go to seek help, and then they started to seek help themselves. So sometimes you have to go the road yourself and check it out before other people will believe it works, because there's a stigma that it doesn't work and it's a white people thing, and that's it.
Wow, I appreciate you sharing that, Amleth. Essentially, you're saying it's necessary and needed, but you need to sometimes demonstrate the willingness to do so first to encourage people to do it around you. I appreciate you sharing that. What about you, Cece?
I was not able to like string together any sentences, so I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I think that for a long time, I also didn't consider mental health because I think that for a long time, I didn't even say mental health. I only ever said mental health issues.
Interesting. Okay. Everyone prepare yourself. I feel like this is going to
be So it's this idea that I didn't think about mental health unless I was thinking about the capacity of somebody who overtly presented that they were having a problem, as opposed to the real idea, which is that everybody, just like everybody has health, whether you're feeling great and you can get yourself out of bed every day, you still have health, right? You should still go to the doctor, you should still take your vitamins, you should still, make sure that everybody has health. So everybody has mental health too, even if you are not sort of overtly presenting that you have some type of issue. Everybody has mental health. I think that one of the things that allowed me to not think of it that way is that growing up as an only child, I learned to spend a lot of time in my own head. And I, through that process, have learned to unpack a lot of things on my own. But now that I'm an adult, I sit back and I wonder, what if I had some help to unpack all of those things? How different would my life have been if I wasn't left to unpack all of those things on my own?
You just described an introvert to a T.
Nothing wrong with that. I was about to say, I think that was me. Like, I am an only child, and I am comfortable up here. Like, this is my safe space. But let us roll the overflow. We already have somebody in there, so hold on. We're gonna have 15 minutes of just allowing people from the audience and YouTube to talk with us. So let's go to the overflow. All right. We already have somebody in the overflow. It is the wonderful Susan Caleb Harris. What thoughts do you want to share with us? You're on mute.
Sorry, y'all. What did you say?
What thoughts did you want to share with us?
Oh, nothing at this point, other than I really enjoyed the conversation.
Cool. Then I'm going to push forward because Cece said something, and then Amleth jumped on it real quick. I think there are strengths in the categories of introvert and extroversion. I think both have strengths. One of the strengths that I believe an introvert has is a comfortability with self. Self alone, right? Not being lonely, but self alone. I think it's a strength because one of the things that a therapy and counseling encourage you to do is really spend time with yourself, thinking about what's happening with you, inside of you, around you. That isn't good. That isn't safe for everyone. Let me be honest, there's the detriment because people don't feel safe by themselves. They've gone through that have left them to feel alone and to feel empty, that being alone is a trigger. Like just being by themselves is a trigger. Thinking about their body space and presence is a trigger in and of itself, which is where I think that the extroversion comes in. This idea that being around people can help heal me. And I think that's a benefit of the Black community that I think was robbed of us. We always find a way to seek it out, right? The barbecue, the block party, the prayer in the shed, whatever. We always manage to seek out community. I think it's in the root of who we are. And I think it's because there's healing in that, right? Which the pandemic has definitely brought out. So let me just ask this for you guys. What has been, in Cece, because we're introverts, we can answer for the opposite. What has been the challenge, right, in finding support outside of yourself?
So I'm sorry, can I go?
Because he probably didn't understand my question. He was like, what?
The challenge for me as an extrovert, because I'm an extrovert, is not feeling like people will understand how I feel, or like maybe the thought that if I say, because I have expressed to some people before, like, you know, especially during like the pandemic, that I miss being around people, and sometimes, you know, it leads to like a form of depression and even sometimes anxiety, just because of everything that's happening. And some people just don't get it, you know, like, and so, or it doesn't seem like a big enough issue to some people. Like there are other people who are losing their jobs and, you know, having issues with Corona. So what I'm dealing with may not be as serious or taken as seriously as other people. And that's, for me, is a challenge, and why sometimes I don't seek help outside of myself.
Wow. So just making sure to synthesize what you're saying, the challenge for you looking for support outside of yourself comes from a lack of understanding or being understood. Sorry, a lack of being understood.
Yeah.
Acknowledging
Yeah.
what it is that you're dealing with as being true for you instead of
Right.
minimized or compared to a potential other or challenge or stress.
Exactly. Because this is something that other people, you know, like, I guess a situation that a lot of us have never been in before. And so when you say, yeah, you know, this being isolated is getting to me and things like that, it's like, you know, like they don't really get it.
F.L.O.W, CC, I don't know if I said the question right, but
The question, right? Yeah.
what do you guys have thoughts on that? What's the challenge to seeking help outside yourself?
For me, I think it's pretty similar to what Susan just said. For me, it is the idea that nobody wants to hear your stuff, man. Nobody wants to hear your stuff. Okay. Everybody has their own stuff and nobody wants to hear your stuff. And so sort of getting over that hurdle of like, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody want to hear that.
Now, is that something that you feel is projected to you or something that you believe exists? I'm trying to be very careful with that you believe exists. Do you believe that no one wants to hear your stuff and therefore you do not go to pursue help? Or has it been communicated to you that no one wants to hear your stuff and because of that, you don't pursue help?
Now, here's what I'm going to say, and it's going to sound problematic, but it's the answer.
Okay.
The answer is when I look really deep down inside and search for the truth, the answer is because I don't want to hear anybody's stuff.
Fact. Yeah, I feel like what Cece said is legit. And maybe it is a projection. Like, you're assuming that people feel about you the way that you feel about other people.
The way that when they're talking to me about nonsense and I'm just like,
yeah.
Like, girl, I don't want to hear about that. Okay. Like, I don't want anybody to do me like that, but I know I be doing people like that. So
big facts in the chat on YouTube. Big not small print, all caps. Okay, cool. As a friend of mine used to say, okay, cool. F.L.O.W, I don't know. I'm just gonna transition away from that right now. I'm gonna transition away from that. F.L.O.W, what is the biggest challenge for you?
Just remind me of my family because it's so many of us, and I've heard all of this. I'm just like, I'm not surprised. Okay, cool. Because me and my younger sister, we took the not personality test, but I guess you can call it personality test. So she was more of an extrovert to my introvert. Like I'm INFJ and she's the ENFJ. So basically,
Nice breaks.
She thought the same as Susan and Cece that, oh, no one wants to hear like da, da, da. And I'm like, no, I want to hear all of this because I just want to know what's going on in your head because I already know what's going on in my head. I already know how to boost myself up out of a funk and everything because once I, write it out, talk it out or something, I feel better and I'm done. I'm moved on to it. Don't care if you don't want to hear it or not, you're gonna hear it, okay? So my younger sister, she was like, I need to be more like that and stop just living in that bubble of thinking. Or she said to me she felt guilty or shame for feeling or thinking those things. And I'm like, no, it's called being human, you know? It's a part of being human. You have this language of crying when you're hungry or tired or something's bothering you to smiling when you're happy, that never changed for us as humans because we have words now. We have too many words. We don't even know what to describe these things that we call triggers anymore. There's nothing to describe it. So for me, being an introvert is just self-awareness and being that my extrovert to my introvert, she calls it more intuition, or she calls it more like because it's something where she cares too much. She feels everything everyone feels, and
she's an empath.
Right. So she's that empath where she's always like, if she enters that path with someone else, she's going to feel everything they feel, and she just doesn't even want to start it to begin with, But I keep telling her, you need to just gauge what is you need to just discern people and engage in what's necessary right now to what's not necessary right now to get into.
Yeah, that's real.
Right.
That's real.
Have boundaries with people to let them know if you can.
But so I feel like sometimes I am like that too. Like when people and I think that's even for me, like what you said really, really hit home because sometimes I have to know that my trigger can be taking on too much of other people's stuff.
Right.
And I'm one of those people who, like, when somebody's saying they're going through things, I want to be there for them. Last night I had to tell my husband, like, sometimes I don't talk to people because I don't know if I'm in a space to receive what they're going through because I'm processing stuff myself. And that's something that I had to come to an awareness of.
Right.
Before I couldn't articulate it. I didn't really understand it, why sometimes I would sort of like step away from people. It was weird for me, but now like I'm really starting to understand that sometimes it's because I realize that when somebody comes to me with something, I take it on, and sometimes it can be a lot. And when you are taking on everybody's stuff, plus you're trying to figure out what's going on with you.
I want to go back to what Cece said and really encapsulate what you were all talking about, the management of self and the energies that you can receive. I think it is real, right? I think there's a world that exists that allows us to wonder, like, how much do we want to take on of someone else? Like, how much do I really care about what it is that you're saying? And then the potential guilt that comes up with that sometimes, like, am I wrong for that? I think that is nuanced. Let me just leave it there. Because Amliv highlighted something that is so true and is taught to us in books. Like, babies get their needs met. And we actually begin to shape them, for better or worse, to know when to self-soothe and when not to, which is healthy. It's when language develops where now we begin to introduce things like ignoring somebody, right? Or saying you're saying too much or not saying enough. And we begin to shape these persons that are not sure how to interact with life. I think what I love about therapy, and as an introvert, it's like, to me, fencing, right? You know how to go in, you do a couple of taps, and you back out, right? Because if you stay in for too long, you're gonna get cut, and you're gonna bleed, and it's gonna hurt a lot. And there is a level of management to knowing how much you deal and how much you're meant to deal with other people. And I think that's why I said there's strength and balance to introversion, extroversion as a thought, because an introvert really can find themselves far too lost in self, right? There's a world out there, right? You do not live in space, you're on a planet alone. And that can lead to a level of dependence that can be to your detriment when you really need support. And same thing with the extrovert, right? So used to drawing on energy from the space around them that they can find themselves overwhelmed with that and triggered by the very thing that is potentially a strength. And so I want to kind of just briefly, I want to share this that someone wrote on YouTube and then get some final thoughts from you all. Camilla Alexander says, we don't want to listen to others. We aren't honest with ourselves, so we fake listen. So we want to share, to pause, because we think other people are doing the same thing. So she kind of speaks to this idea of not being honest with ourselves when we're talking to other people, not really saying to ourselves, like, I don't want to hear you right now. And so we think other people are always saying that to us because we create this atmosphere, it seems, of fake listening. Does that make sense, everybody? I think that's how
I agree. I agree with what Camilla said. And I would push it even further to say sometimes like we can't be honest with ourselves because we don't know. Like some of us are not self-aware, you know, so we can't be honest because we don't even know, we haven't even taken the time to like self-assess. And so, you know, like I said, that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about like how sometimes I will listen and, you know, try to take things in. Other times it's more difficult for me. And at one point I really didn't understand why I did that. And it wasn't until one day when I kind of sat with my thoughts that I realized, yeah, it's probably because I have some stuff going on internally. And this just feels like a lot when I have to hear about what somebody else is going through, because I haven't really even properly processed what I'm dealing with. So I completely agree with that. I think it's difficult though to be honest with yourself if you don't understand what's going on with you.
I guess you'll keep telling your lie. I read a book from an author about trauma that said one of the greatest damage we do to ourselves is believing the lies that we tell ourselves. And it was very profound for me as it relates to trauma. So I want to thank you all for sharing. I want to get a kind of a closing thought on this concept of triggered. This is the first episode of our series for Triggered as we talk about mental health. Just kind of want to lay the groundwork of this environment and what it means to be triggered. And we definitely talked about a number of things. So I'll leave the closing moments, and even Susan, our guest, you can share if any thoughts. Just what do you want to leave with the audience based on this topic, based on our conversation? The space is yours. Whoever feels like they want to go first can go ahead, please.
I think what I want to leave with everyone is it's important to sit with yourself and really understand your emotions. A lot of times we're afraid to do that. And so my encouragement is like, you know, taking some time to really sit with yourself quietly, disconnecting from social media, and really become in tune with your emotions. I feel like only then will you really understand what triggers you and what the root of that trigger is. But we can't do that if we're so busy all the time that we don't make that time to sit with ourselves and our emotions.
Appreciate you sharing that, Susan. I'm making the assumption that you guys want to say something, but I want to make sure to leave a space. Emily or Cece, you guys want to share anything?
Yes, I completely agree with Susan. When it comes to triggers, I would say be open, be willing to explore what the root cause of it could be, and also be kind to yourself. If you have to give boundaries to others around you, that you need a little bit more time before you just engage whatever the topic is, or if you just need time for yourself, period. Just don't make the excuse and just be willing and open to be kind to yourself.
You're muted.
Appreciate you sharing that. Be willing and open to be kind to yourself. Cece?
I love the idea of tying triggered into mental health because I think that most people don't think that being triggered is a part of being tied to is a part of mental health. And I think even more to the point, the attitude that I hear about people being triggered is this idea that the way that you feel and past experiences being brought up and you feeling all of those emotions, that is a thing for you to deal with. And the world does not need to respond accordingly because you are triggered.
Wow.
But when we break it down to a base level, to go back to the point that I made earlier, if we've created a world where women feel like they need to put their car keys between their knuckles, then it is our responsibility that women feel triggered. And it is our responsibility to fix that. And it's not just sort of this small deal of like, women are triggered. It's like, no, we've created a world where women have anxiety. How are we going to fix that?
I appreciate you sharing that, CC. And I think this goes on to Simone Walton, a faithful follower of F.L.O.W, said, individuals need to work on building emotional intelligence so they better understand their triggers and learn how to manage their emotions. I want to thank you all, Amliv and CC. Y'all wrote with me. I appreciate it. It was a wonderful conversation. So, Amliv, you are regular. CC, you are always welcome back. You got in connection to the core team. And before we close with the connection, I want to make some announcements. So we've started this thing called the playlist, and on our YouTube channel right now, if you are a subscriber, you want to just click and watch. We got spiritual playlists, right? Just 7 songs to encourage you whenever you might need it. They're all themed. They're actually made by the F.L.O.W team members. So if you like are in a certain mood, go through, check out a playlist. I actually going to have mine uploaded soon, so check it out. I think you guys will clearly see the theme, so I hope you're encouraged by that. So check it out. And so let me make the connection. So this space was created by a bunch of young adults who realized that they had been triggered at times in the spiritual spaces that they existed in. And we wanted to feel safe. We wanted to talk about the things that impacted our lives in a real sense, where we are, where we wanted to go, and how we wanted to grow. And we knew that we had friends and people connected to us. And that's a personal passion of mine, to create safe spaces. And I want to share 2 scriptures with you as encouragement, excuse me, and tools to help you begin to establish a sense of sound mental health. And the first one's in Psalms. It should come up in a moment, and I'll read that for you guys. It says in Proverbs 17:22, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up bones. I believe, CC, you articulated, you mentioned this idea that like your base is good, right? Your base is feeling well. And it's kind of like having a joyful spirit. Like it's good, like it heals all things. But man, when you're triggered and when things happen to you, it feels like a weight that's deep within you. I want to encourage you that it's okay to recognize that change, right? It's okay to understand that something happened within you. And so I want to transition to the scripture found in 2 Timothy, which also will be coming up, which says, God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love, of self-control. Some versions say a sound mind, and I really love that it says a sound mind.
Stir up the gift.
He went his Kojic. Back to the Kojic days. The soundness, CC and everyone, and Emily, I feel like you speak to it as well. Love is such a powerful thing, and it is, in essence, for the Christian, really at the root of all things. And love grounds us in this idea that there was greater, there was something more for us. And when you surround yourself with a community of people that support you and believe in you, when you can turn to someone who you can trust, and there's love there, that actually grounds you mentally. So when we do this, when we have these conversations here at F.L.O.W, we are not trying to just stir up things within you, but we're trying to let you know that there is a community here of people that look like you or don't look like you, but are desiring to create safe spaces. So I want you to really feel encouraged, anyone who watches this or goes back and watches it or shares it with someone else, to know that F.L.O.W is about creating safe spaces, healing spaces, encouraging spaces for all people. And to know that love, you are loved here, you're welcomed here, because we want you to have a sound and safe mind, a mind at peace. Our series will continue next week. Look forward to it. Also, in November 29th, we're going to start our 7 words, our next 7 words on endurance. something to look out for. So if you are a subscriber to the page, look out for it. We're going to talk about endurance. Got a group of really dope people going to get together and chop it up. So that's all I got for you guys. Hope you are blessed. Enjoy your weekend. We got a new president coming in January 17th. I don't care how the old one goes out, right? Because a new one's coming in. So that's all we got.